Hi, I'm Marty Walsh, and this is Trifecta Gallery. This month we're featuring the Biscuit Street Preacher. His large-scale paintings, and he's a local artist, and this is his second solo show with us, and it's really gaining a lot of attention. We've sold his work on both coasts, and we're very excited to have him back. A good description of his work is that he has this great imagination. He's a storyteller in his own mind. He tells his daughter stories. He loves to walk the urban and look at the back end of the underbelly of the urban grit. And he will show you the outside, but all of the underlying and some of the metaphorical images are the message and maybe the underbelly of what really goes on. So there's maybe hobos that collect the pallets on the grocery carts, and then they turn them into the center for money, like recycling. And then he imagines there's this whole world living amongst all these pallets and behind, and maybe there's a carnival going on. So he'll draw like the bust one wins game, and that'll be behind the scenes of all the pallets. And then there's another painting that's one of my favorites that he did this year, and it's called Top Two Floors, and it's about executive burnout. Now the people in the windows, if you look closely, they're matchsticks, and some of them are burned out, and some of them are the young new upstart CEOs on the top two floors that are ready to set the world on fire, but in the background there are burned out matches too. So he's a great storyteller. He's a self-taught painter, and he's the real deal. He's not just somebody that's trying to make a buck off putting something on canvas. He is the real deal, and that's what we look for. And he's a really good craftsman as well. He's getting much better at the craft of making his canvases, so they're really well constructed. But when he first did them, they were all kind of boggedy and woggly, and but the paintings were so good that we couldn't resist. But he's really coming up into the next level. Our gallery's mission is to find emerging talent and a little beyond, but it's also that most of our clientele are emerging collectors. And so with my and Susan's help to try to pick out the quality artists, we take sort of the homework out and the scariness out for the emerging collector, and we teach them a little bit about how to read a painting, how to look at the different aspects of what makes a good painting. And so to focus on emerging collectors as well as emerging talent gets people excited when they buy their first piece of art, and then they feel like they're ready to go again. It takes the intimidation out of it. And I really, really like it when people acquire their first piece and then get all excited and start reading about it, and then they become collectors and they come back and usually get more. I think when you're an emerging collector, there's a lot of fear of spending too much money and that you might make a mistake. But although we help them through that, we do have price points that are for the timid, and then we have price points for the more the brave and the people who know that they're getting a good painting. And our large paintings are usually priced at a really good rate because I find the quality. I do that research and homework. Yeah, we have paintings sometimes, well, right on the rack now we have Ripper Jordan, three really well-known and very respectable world-class artists in their own right have formed a little company called Ripper Jordan, and they wanted to produce small works for the emerging, something fun. And there are pieces from $25 to $40 on the rack. And those are a lot of fun. If you can't shell out $10,000 for a David Ryan, you can get a collaborative piece for $40, which is totally meant to be a lot of fun. We always have the rack, which has pieces from previous shows, a selection. So if somebody interested saw a show 6 months ago, they can always come back and ask us about it, and we'll probably have something from that artist that we can tell them about. If it hasn't been sold, we usually keep 1 or 2 examples from each of the artists that we have shown. I studied art, and I'm also a painter, but since the gallery has been becoming so successful, I've had less time to paint, and I really am committed to the artists that we show, and I want to do the right thing and have a lot of integrity for the artist.
I'm Richard Vosseller. This is my work here, the sculptural work in the exhibit. I was invited out here by David Sanchez Burr to come out to the CAC and be a part of the Metasonic exhibit. So was doing painting when I met David Burr, and the paintings were a lot more about sort of rock and roll, about louder and louder and more paint and thicker paint. And I realized what I was doing was making sculptural objects. And so I began making these objects that were as quiet as they could be, sort of going to the opposite end of the spectrum and making these things here. And this work actually came about from a project I finished about this time last year. Was called Captain Ahab. And it was this massive thing out of 2x4s and steel, and it was 16 feet tall and 53 feet long and took over the entire space in a gallery. And before I got to that, I had to make a 16th inch scale model of it, and that was made out of 1/8 inch birch and hot glue. And I remember being at that opening, looking at that work and thinking what I really enjoyed was the model itself. And I thought, well, what if the model were the actual thing? And so that's how these sort of came about. The original idea was to build a 747 wing to scale, which would have been 134 feet long. I have a tendency to overdo things, and this is sort of the result of those interests and where they went. And I guess that for my money, you know, the idea of an airplane wing, the idea of a wing in and of itself is that it's that which makes the intangible, the air around us, it makes it tangible. You know, that you actually, when you're flying, you actually exist on something that is intangible. And this has connections to Zen and Buddhism and this idea of creation and destruction, or the sort of non-existence of duality of things. And so that's really how this all came about. And I think that, you know, looking at them now, it's very interesting how light they are and how quiet they are. And I think that in terms of the Metasonic exhibit, that, you know, Dave's work with the pulsing in and out of the loud sound seems to really work well. There seems to be this nice balance between things affecting each other. Metasonic is the name of the exhibit, is the title of the exhibit. And I think it really has to do with the idea of sound, whether it is in sort of the different ways that sound can affect things, whether it be in David Sanchez's work where the sound is actually vibrating pieces around or moving pieces around, you know, or this idea of sound as quiet. But in his sort of curating talk, Dave was talking about sound being, you know, something that we attribute to objects a lot of times, whether we know it or not. This sort of presupposed idea of the sound it's going to make. When you hear a car driving past, you already know what it's going to sound like, or a motorcycle, and this sort of idea of flipping those thoughts of what sound can do and how it affects objects, or how it affects our preconceived notions of the world around us. So.